The blue light flickered across Elder Lyrana's face as she stood before the quantum transmitter. Her hands shook as she prepared to send a message across the galaxy. Behind her, the crystal city of Zephyros burned. The screams of her people echoed. Through the underground chambers, where the last free Zephyrians hid, Lyrana had lived for 800 years. She had seen her people build wonders that touched the stars. They had created medicines that could heal any wound and grown food that could feed entire worlds. But they had never learned to fight. Now the Krex Empire was making them pay for that choice. The Krex had come 3 months ago. Their massive ships had blocked out the sun above every Zephyrian world. The aliens were twice as tall as any Zephian, covered in thick armor that grew from their own bodies. They fought with weapons that could melt stone and ships that could crack planets. But worse than their weapons was their cruelty. The Krex did not just conquer worlds, they broke them. They took the strongest Zephyrians and made them into slaves. They destroyed art and music and books. They wanted to erase everything that made the Zephyrians who they were. Lyrana's fingers moved over the transmitter controls. She had heard whispers about a species called humans. The other races in the galaxy spoke of them in hushed tones. Some said they were monsters. Others said they were the most dangerous warriors in the universe. All agreed on one thing. Humans knew how to fight. The quantum message would take everything they had left. Their power cells were nearly dead. The Krex would find them soon. But maybe, just maybe, someone would hear their cry for help far across the galaxy. Admiral Jake Morrison sat in his command chair on Luna Station. The moon base orbited Earth like a metal guardian, bristling with weapons and sensors. Jake had been watching the galaxy for 20 years, learning about the aliens who lived among the stars. Earth was not part of the Galactic Council. The other species thought humans were too young, too wild, too violent. They had sent ambassadors once, telling Earth to stay quiet and peaceful. Jake remembered the day those ambassadors left, shaking their heads and muttering about primitive savages. Was fine with Jake. While the galaxy played its political games, humanity had been preparing. They built ships in the shadows between planets. They trained soldiers in secret bases. They studied every alien race they could find, learning their strengths and weaknesses. The communications officer looked up from her station. Lieutenant Beth. Alan had been monitoring alien frequencies for 5 years. She knew the patterns of trade ships and passenger liners. This was different. Admiral, we're getting a transmission, she said. It's not from any known source. The signal is very weak and breaking up. Put it through, Jake ordered. The voice that filled the command center was soft and musical, but filled with pain. The words were translated by their computers, but the emotion needed no translation. To anyone who can hear this message, my name is Lyrana of the Zephyrian people. We are dying. The Krex Empire has destroyed our worlds and enslaved our children. We have tried to fight, but we do not know how. We have heard stories of a species called humans. They say you are warriors. They say you know how to win battles against impossible odds. Please, if you can hear this, help us. We have nothing left to offer except our gratitude, but we will. Remember your kindness for as long as our people survive. The message ended. The command center was silent for a long moment. Jake stared at the display showing the transmission's origin point. It had come from the far edge of the galaxy, from a region controlled by the Krex Empire. Sir, Beth said quietly, there's more. The signal included star charts and tactical data about Krex forces. Whoever sent this risked everything to get it to us. Jake nodded slowly. He had read the reports about the Krex. They were one of the oldest and most powerful empires in the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved millions of beings. The Galactic Council called them a manageable threat and did nothing, But Jake knew something the Council did not. He knew that humans had been born on a world where everything tried to kill them. They had learned to fight not just other humans, but nature itself. They had turned war into an art form and survival into a science. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command," Jake said. "Priority, Alpha." Within minutes, Jake was speaking to President Lisa Torres in her underground bunker beneath Washington. The president listened to the recording without interruption. When it ended, she was quiet for a long time. "How many ships would we need?" she asked finally. "One to start with," Jake replied. "But we'll need our best people. This won't be a fair fight." President Torres smiled grimly. "Admiral, when have we ever fought fair?" 6 hours later, emergency meetings were happening in secret locations across Earth. General Rick Barnes gathered his staff in a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. Admiral Susan Cole assembled her fleet commanders on a space station hidden behind Jupiter. Colonel Matt Stone called together the best Special Forces officers from every branch of the military. The message was simple. Innocent people were dying, and Earth was going to do something about it. The Galactic Council could keep playing politics. Humanity would handle this the way they handled everything else, with overwhelming force and zero mercy for those who hurt the defenseless. As the meetings continued through the night, weapons were loaded and ships were fueled. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives for a war like this finally had their chance. The Krex Empire was about to learn why humans were feared across the galaxy. They had asked for Earth's help. They were about to get humanity's most merciless warriors. Colonel Matt Stone stood in the briefing room, deep beneath Colorado's mountains. Around him sat 20 of Earth's deadliest soldiers. These men and women had been chosen from thousands of candidates. Each one was a master of war in their own way. Matt looked at the files spread across the table. He had served in every major conflict of the last 15 years. He had seen good soldiers die because they followed rules that the enemy ignored. Today, those rules would not matter. The Krex Empire was about to face an enemy that wrote its own rules. "Listen up," Matt said. "We're going to war against aliens who think they know how to fight. They've conquered 47 worlds in 10 years. They've never lost a battle. That's about to change." Sergeant Amanda Cross sat in the front row, cleaning her rifle. She was small and quiet, but she could put a bullet through a target from 2 miles away. Amanda had grown up hunting in the mountains of Montana. Her father taught her that every shot had to count. In 12 years of military service, she had never missed a target that mattered. "What do we know about Krex armor?" Amanda asked. Matt pulled up a holographic display. The Krex warrior stood 8 feet tall, covered in thick plates that looked like black metal. Their armor is grown, not made. It's part of their bodies. But our scientists found something interesting. The joints have to be flexible. That means they're weaker there. Lieutenant Steve Parker laughed from the back of the room. Steve was a demolitions expert who could make a bomb from kitchen supplies. He had served with Navy SEALs for 8 years, always finding new ways to blow things up. "Armor doesn't matter if you're standing next to an explosion," he said. Captain Nina Walsh studied the tactical data on her tablet. She was an Air Force pilot who had become famous for winning battles. That should have been impossible. Nina could look at a battlefield and see patterns that others missed. Her strategies had saved thousands of lives and won dozens of battles. "The Krex fight in formations," Nina said. "They advance in straight lines and use overwhelming firepower. They've won every battle the same way for centuries. They don't know how to adapt when the enemy doesn't follow their rules." Army Ranger Danny Clark nodded from his seat. Danny had spent 5 years fighting in jungles and deserts where conventional warfare meant death. He knew how to use the environment as a weapon. He could teach farmers to become guerrilla fighters and turn peaceful villages into death traps for invaders. We need to study their psychology, Danny said. From what I've read, the Kreks believe in honor and direct combat. They think sneaking around and using traps is cowardly. That's going to be their weakness. Matt smiled. These soldiers understood what made humans different. Other species fought to prove their strength or claim territory. Humans fought to win, and they would use any method that worked. While the soldiers planned their mission, Captain Tony Mitchell prepared his ship. The USS Vengeance was humanity's most advanced stealth vessel. It could travel faster than light without being detected and carry enough firepower to destroy a small moon. But more importantly, it was crewed by volunteers who knew they might not come home. Tony had commanded ships for 15 years. He had fought pirates and smugglers in the outer system. But this was different. This was humanity's first official act of war against an alien empire. The responsibility weighed on him like a lead blanket. Chief Engineer Karen Brown worked in the engine room, checking every system twice. Karen was a genius with machines. She could make broken equipment work with spare parts and determination. For this mission, she had installed experimental weapons that had never been tested in real combat. "Captain," Karen said over the con system, "the new plasma cannons are ready. But I can't promise they won't overload if we use them too much." "How much is too much?" Tony asked. "More than 10 shots in a row. After that, we might blow ourselves." Tony sighed. Everything about this mission was risky. But Earth had made its decision. They would help the Zephyrians, no matter what it cost. Communications Officer Paul Evans sat at his station, trying to establish contact with the Zephyrian resistance. Paul spoke 12 languages and could decode any signal given enough time. He had been working for 6 hours to punch a message through Krek's jamming systems. "Got something," Paul announced. "Weak signal from the Zephyrian home system. Someone's still alive down there." The voice that came through the speakers was young and frightened. The translation software turned the alien words into English, but Ephir needed no translation. "This is Vector of the Zephyrian resistance. We are hiding in the deep caves. The Kreks control the surface. Our people are being taken to work camps. Please, if anyone receives this message, we need help. We cannot fight them alone." Tony activated the transmitter. "Victor, this is Captain Mitchell of the Earthship Vengeance. We received Elder Lyrina's message. Help is coming. Can you provide tactical information about Krek's positions?" The silence stretched for several minutes. Then Victor's voice returned, filled with disbelief and hope. "Humans, you came? I will send everything we know. But please hurry. They are hunting us. We may not have much time." Data began flowing through the communications link. Maps of Krek's bases, patrol schedules, weak points in their defenses. The Zephyrians had been watching their enemies, learning their patterns. It was exactly what the human strike team needed. In his office aboard Luna Station, Admiral Jake Morrison reviewed the mission parameters. The USS Vengeance would carry the strike team to Zephyrian space. They would link up with the Resistance and begin hitting Krek's targets. The goal was not to win a conventional war. The goal was to prove that the Kreks could be beaten. Jake had fought in 3 wars and commanded fleets in a 12 battles. He knew that victory was not always about having the biggest guns or the most ships. Sometimes victory came from making the enemy afraid to fight. The Kreks had ruled through fear for centuries. They arrived at a world with overwhelming force and crushed any resistance. Other species surrendered rather than face destruction. But humans had learned something important during their violent history. Fear worked both ways. If the human strike team could win even one battle against the Kreks, it would change everything. Other species would realize that the Empire could be defeated. Rebellions would start on conquered worlds. The Kreks would have to fight on 100 fronts instead of expanding to new targets. But first, they had to survive contact with an enemy that had never lost a war dot as the USS Vengeance. Prepared to leave Earth's solar system, messages were sent to resistance groups across the galaxy. The messages were short and simple. Humanity was going to war against the Kreks Empire. The age of conquest was about to end. The ship's engines roared to life, tearing a hole in space itself. In 6 days, they would reach Zephyrian space. The Kreks Empire was about to face an enemy they had never encountered before. An enemy that fought not for glory or conquest, but for the simple belief that bullies should be stopped. The war was about to begin. The USS Vengeance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyrian system. Captain Tony Mitchell stared at the main screen, watching the red dots that marked Kreks warships. There were dozens of them, patrolling like sharks in bloody water. "Take. Use in quiet," Tony ordered. Full stealth mode. The ship's hull shifted color, becoming invisible against the black of space. Their engines went silent, using only momentum to drift toward the third planet. According to the star charts, that was where the last free Zephyrians were hiding dot in the cargo bay. Colonel Matt Stone gathered his strike team. They wore black armor that absorbed light and sound. Their weapons were designed to kill efficiently and quietly. Each soldier carried enough ammunition to fight a small war. "Remember," Matt said, "the Kreks have never faced an enemy like us. They expect honorable combat and fair fights. We're going to give them neither." Sergeant Amanda Cross checked her rifle's scope one last time. She had studied the recordings of Kreks anatomy for hours. She knew exactly where to aim to drop one of the giants in a single shot. Her rifle could punch through their armor at ranges where they could not even see her dot lieutenant. Steve Parker loaded his gear bag with explosives. Steve had brought enough C4 to level a city block, plus timer devices, remote detonators, and improvised bombs made from common chemicals. The Kreks would learn that humans could turn anything into a weapon. Captain Nia Walsh reviewed the tactical maps on her tablet. The Kreks had built their base in an open valley, surrounded by high walls and automated weapons. It was a perfect fortress against conventional attack. But Nina saw the flaws that its builders had missed. Army Ranger Danny Clark studied the photographs of Zephyrian civilians in work camps. The blue-skinned aliens looked broken and afraid. Their captors stood over them with shock weapons, beating anyone who moved too slowly. Danny had seen this before in human conflicts. It always made him angry. Ship's shuttle bay opened silently. The strike team climbed into a stealth transport that would carry them to the planet's surface. As they descended through the atmosphere, Paul Evans monitored Kreks communications. "They're not expecting trouble," Paul reported. "Standard patrol. Reports. No alerts. They think they've won." The transport landed in a mountain valley 50 miles from the main Kreks base. The team moved out immediately, carrying their equipment through forests that reminded them of Earth. But these trees were silver instead of green, and the air tasted of metal and ozone. They found the cave entrance after 2 hours of searching. Vector was waiting for them, along with a dozen other Zephyrians. The aliens were smaller than humans, with large eyes and skin that changed color with their emotions. Right now, that skin was dark with fear and pain. "You came," Vector whispered. "I did not believe it was possible. The Kreks seemed so powerful." Matt knelt beside the young alien. "Power isn't about size or armor. It's about will. Do your people have the will to fight back?" Vector's skin flickered with patterns of light. "We want to fight, but we do not know how. We are healers and farmers. We have never learned to kill." "Then we'll teach you," Danny said. "But first, we need to hit them where it hurts. Show us where they keep your people prisoner." The Zephyrians led them through underground tunnels that connected to a network of caves their ancestors had carved. These passages thousands of years ago, never imagining they would be used to hide from invaders. The tunnels emerged near the prison camp where captured Zephyrians were forced to work in the mines. Through their binoculars, the human team studied the camp. It was surrounded by an energy barrier that would kill anyone who touched it. Guard. Towers stood at each corner, manned by Krek soldiers in full armor. Searchlights swept the compound every few minutes. "How many prisoners?" Nina asked. 3,000, Vector replied. "Men, women, and children. The Kreks work them 18 hours a day. Many have died from exhaustion." Amanda Cross was already calculating angles and distances. The guard towers were 800 meters away, well within range of her rifle. The Kreks guards were large targets that moved in predictable patterns. "I can take out the sentries," she said, "but we'll need a distraction." Steve Parker smiled as he unpacked his explosives. "I can provide that. See that power generator? One small charge in the right place, and their whole security grid goes down." "What about their reinforcements?" Matt asked. "How long before more?" "Kreks arrive?" 20 minutes, Victor said. "There is a garrison 5 miles away, but their vehicles cannot travel quickly through the mountain passes." Matt nodded. 20 minutes was enough time if they moved fast and hit hard. "Nina, what's your plan?" Nina pointed to the map she had drawn in the dirt. "We create chaos. Amanda takes out the guards. Steve kills the power. Danny and I lead the assault teams through the fence. We grab as many prisoners as we can and get out before backup arrives." "What about the Kreks inside the compound?" Vector asked. Danny's face was grim. "We kill them all. The attack began at midnight." Amanda Cross lay on a ridge overlooking the camp, her rifle steady against a rock. Through her scope, she could see the Kreks guards in their towers. They were bored and complacent, never imagining that death was watching them from the darkness. Her first shot took the head off a guard in the northern tower. Before his body hit the ground, she had shifted targets. The second guard died before he could sound an alarm. The third tried to reach his communicator, but took a bullet through the chest. The fourth guard realized something was wrong and started to shout. Amanda's bullet cut off his words forever. 4 shots in 8 seconds. 4 dead Kreks. The towers were clear. Steve Parker moved like a ghost through the perimeter. His explosives were planted with surgical precision, just enough to destroy the power grid without alerting the guards inside. When he triggered the detonator, the entire camp went dark. Emergency lights kicked in, but they were dim and scattered. The energy barrier around the compound flickered and died. Alarms began to sound, but it was too late. The humans were already inside. Danny Clark led a team of Zephyrians through the gap in the fence. He carried an assault rifle that fired armor-piercing rounds, while the aliens behind him had been given simple weapons and basic instructions. The first rule of guerrilla warfare was that anyone could be a soldier if they were angry enough. Kreks guards inside the compound were caught completely off guard. They had expected to fight honorable battles against other warriors, not face invisible enemies who struck from shadows. Their heavy armor made them slow and clumsy in the darkness. Danny's rifle chattered as he put down 3 guards who were trying to organize a defense. Behind him, the Zephyrians fought with desperate courage, using their knowledge of the camp layout to outmaneuver their captors. Walsh coordinated the assault from her position near the main gate. She could see the entire battlefield and direct her forces where they were needed most. When a group of Kreks tried to set up a heavy weapon, she called in Amanda's sniper fire. When prisoners needed an escape route, she guided them through the chaos. The battle lasted 12 minutes. When it was over, 3,000 Zephyrian prisoners were free and 47 Krex guards were dead. The humans had lost no one, though. Several Zephyrians had been wounded as they led the freed prisoners toward the mountain caves. Sirens wailed in the distance. Krex reinforcements were coming, but they would find only empty buildings and dead guards. The prisoners had vanished into the underground network like ghosts in his command center 50 miles away. Krex Commander Vashtok stared at the reports in disbelief. An entire prison camp had been destroyed by an unknown enemy. His guards had been killed by weapons that left no energy signatures. The prisoners had disappeared without a trace. Who did this? He demanded. Unknown, Commander, his aide replied. The attackers used projectile weapons and chemical explosives. Such primitive technology should have been ineffective against our armor. Vashtok studied the battlefield recordings. The enemy had moved with impossible precision, striking exactly where his defenses were weakest. They had fought like cowards, hiding in darkness and refusing to show themselves. But they had won. For the first time in 300 years of conquest, the Krex Empire had suffered a defeat, and Vashtok had no idea who was responsible. In the mountain caves, the freed Zephyrian prisoners wept with joy and relief. Many of them had thought they would die in the work camps. Now they were free, and their rescuers were teaching them how to fight back. Matt Stone gathered his team for a debriefing. The mission had gone perfectly, but this was only the beginning. Word of their victory would spread to other Krex bases. The enemy would be ready for them next time. "How do you feel about your first battle?" he asked Vector. The young Zephyrian's skin glowed with fierce pride. "I feel like a warrior. For the first time in my life, I understand what it means to fight for something important." Danny Clark smiled and handed him a human combat knife. "Then welcome to the Resistance. Now let's teach your people how to make the Krex pay for every world they've conquered." The war had begun in earnest, and the Krex Empire was about to learn that humans never fought fair when innocent lives were at stake. Krex warlord Thakmer stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the holographic display of the Zephyrian system. Red markers showed where his forces had been attacked over the past month. 7 bases destroyed, 12 supply convoys ambushed, 3 prison camps liberated, nearly 2,000 of his warriors dead. The enemy remained invisible. They struck from shadows and vanished before his forces could respond. They used primitive weapons that somehow pierced Krex armor. Worst of all, they were teaching the Zephyrians to fight back. "Bring me the battlefield recordings." Thakmer ordered. His aide activated the display. Grainy images showed explosions in the night, muzzle flashes from positions that should have been empty, and Krex warriors falling to weapons that made no sound. The enemy moved like spirits, appearing only long enough to kill. Analysis? Thakmer demanded. "The attackers are definitely not Zephyrian," his tactical officer reported. "Their weapons use chemical propulsion and metal projectiles. Their tactics suggest military training far beyond anything the locals possess. Someone is helping them." Thakmer's claws scraped against the metal railing. In 3 centuries of conquest, no enemy had dared to interfere with Krex expansion. Other species trembled at the mention of his empire's name. But these mysterious warriors seemed to enjoy the fight. "Deploy the hunter squads," he ordered. "I want these ghosts found and destroyed." Deep in the mountain caves, Colonel Matt Stone studied the intelligence reports that Victor scouts had gathered. The Krex were bringing in their elite forces, heavily armored troops with advanced sensors and tracking equipment. The easy victories were over. "They're learning," Nina Walsh said as she reviewed the tactical data. "The new Krex units are using different patrol patterns and setting up overlapping fields of fire. They're trying to counter our advantages." Amanda Cross cleaned her rifle while she listened to the briefing. "Doesn't matter how much armor they wear. I can still put a bullet through their visors at 1,000 meters. The problem isn't killing them, Mac replied. The problem is getting close enough. These hunter squads have thermal imaging and motion detectors. They can track us through the forests. Steve Parker looked up from the bomb he was assembling. Then we don't fight them in the forests. We bring them to us and blow them up. Danny Clark nodded. Steve's right. We set up kill zones where we control the terrain. Let them think they're hunting us while we lead them into traps. Matt smiled. His team was adapting to the changing situation, finding new ways to turn the enemy's strength against them. That was what made humans dangerous. They never stopped learning and evolving. While the strike team planned their next move, Captain Tony Michel faced his own problems in space. The USS Vengeance had been hiding in the asteroid belt for weeks, but Krek's patrol ships were getting closer. His stealth systems were good, but they were not perfect. Contact bearing 270, reported sensor operator Lisa Gray. Krek's heavy cruiser, moving on an intercept course. Tony studied the tactical display. The enemy ship was 3 times the size of the Vengeance, with enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. But it was also slow and predictable. Karen, how are those experimental weapons holding up? He asked over the comm. They're ready, Captain, Chief Engineer Karen Brown replied. But remember what I said about overheating. 10 shots maximum. Understood. Paul, any word from the surface team? Communications Officer Paul Evans shook his head. Nothing for 6 hours. The Kreks are jamming all frequencies. Tony made his decision. We're going to hit that cruiser. Maybe we can draw some heat away from our people on the ground. The Vengeance powered up its weapons and dropped its stealth field. Immediately, alarms began sounding on the Krek's cruiser. The enemy captain probably thought he was facing a lost merchant ship or a small patrol vessel. He was wrong. The Vengeance's first salvo of plasma bolts punched through the cruiser's shields like they were made of paper. The experimental weapons that Karen had installed were designed to overload alien energy barriers, and they worked perfectly. Direct hits on their engine section, Lisa reported. They're losing power. The Krek's cruiser tried to return fire, but its massive weapons could not track the smaller human ship. Tony used the Vengeance's superior speed and maneuverability to stay ahead of the alien guns while pounding the enemy with precise shots. That's 8 shots, Karen warned. 2 more, and we risk a meltdown. Tony watched as the Krek's cruiser launched. Fighters, small, fast ships that could match his speed. Time to go. All power to engines. The Vengeance jumped to hyperspace just as the fighters reached weapons range. Behind them, the crippled Krek's cruiser drifted helplessly, its crew struggling to restore power. On the surface, the human strike team had set their trap in a narrow canyon 20 miles from the main Krek's base. Steve Parker had spent 2 days placing charges along the cliff walls, creating a killing field that would collapse on command. Victor and 50 Zephyrian fighters were hidden in caves along the canyon rim. They carried human weapons now, assault rifles, grenade launchers, and combat knives. Danny Clark had trained them well, turning peaceful farmers into deadly guerrilla fighters. Movement on the approach, Amanda reported from her sniper position. Krek's Hunter Squad, 12 troops in powered armor. They're following our false trail perfectly. The Kreks moved cautiously into the canyon, their sensors sweeping for hidden enemies. Their armor was heavier than standard troops, designed to protect against the kind of weapons humans used. Their helmets had advanced targeting systems that could see through walls, but they could not see through solid rock. Matt waited until the entire squad was in the kill zone before giving the signal. Light them up. Amanda's rifle spoke first, her armor-piercing round punching through a hunter's visor and dropping him instantly. The rest of the squad spun toward her position, but she was already moving to her backup hide. Steve triggered the first set of charges, a section of cliff Face came crashing down, crushing 3 Krex warriors under tons of stone. The survivors tried to retreat, but Danny's team opened fire from the opposite wall. The canyon became a shooting gallery. Trapped between collapsing cliffs and hidden gunmen, the hunter squad fought desperately. Their heavy weapons scorched the rock walls, but they could not hit targets. They could not see Nina, who coordinated the battle from her command post, directing fire teams and calling in explosions. The Zephyrians fought with savage joy, finally able to strike back at their oppressors. Their blue skin glowed with patterns of victory as they watched their enemies fall. The last Krex hunter tried to escape on foot, running for the canyon mouth. Victor stepped into his path, raising the combat knife that Danny had given him. The alien warrior towered over the small Zephyrian, but size did not matter anymore. Victor moved like Danny had taught him, fast and low. His knife found the gap between armor plates, sliding between ribs to pierce the hunter's heart. The Krex toppled backward, dead before he hit the ground in his command center. Warlord Thakmer received the news in stunned silence. An entire hunter squad had been wiped out. Not one survivor remained to report what had happened. The enemy was not just winning battles. They were erasing his forces completely. "Bring me the prisoner," he ordered. Guards dragged in a captured Zephyrian, one of the few rebels they had managed to take alive. The alien was broken and bloody, but his eyes still held defiance. "Tell me about these warriors who help you," Thakmer demanded. "What species are they? Where do they come from?" The Zephyrian smiled through his pain. "They call themselves humans. They come from a world called Earth, and they are going to destroy you." Thakmer had never heard of humans or Earth, but that was about to change. He activated his long-range communications array and sent a message to the Krex homeworld. This rebellion had gone beyond a local problem. It was time to bring in the full might of the Empire. "Summon the Death Fleet," he ordered. "I want 10,000 warriors and enough firepower to burn every world in this system." His aide hesitated. "Warlord, the Death Fleet is reserved for major threats." "Are you certain these humans warrant such response?" Thakmer studied the tactical reports again. 7 bases destroyed, 12 convoys ambushed, an entire hunter squad eliminated. And somewhere out there, invisible enemies were teaching an entire species how to wage war. "Yes," he said finally. "I am certain. These humans fight like demons, and they are turning the Zephyrians into warriors. If we do not stop them here, the rebellion will spread to other worlds." The message streaked across space toward the Krex homeworld. Within days, the largest fleet in their empire's history would arrive to crush the human threat. But Thakmer did not know that his enemies had been preparing for this moment in the mountain caves. Matt Stone received a coded transmission from the USS Vengeance. Admiral Morrison was sending reinforcements, not just one ship, but an entire battle group. Earth's Second Fleet was coming to finish what the strike team had started. The Krex wanted a real war. They were about to get one. The Krex Death Fleet arrived at the edge of the Zephyrian system like a black storm. 200 warships dropped out of hyperspace, their hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. At their head flew the dreadnought World Breaker, a ship so massive it had its own gravity field. Warlord Thakmer stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as his armada formed battle lines. 10,000 of the Empire's finest warriors waited in their ships, ready to crush the mysterious humans who had dared to challenge Krex might. "Deploy bombardment platforms around the third planet," he ordered. "If these humans want to hide with the Zephyrians, we will burn both species together." But as the Death Fleet moved into position, space itself seemed to ripple. Points of light appeared throughout the system, growing brighter until they resolved into ships. Human ships, sleek and deadly, emerging from hyperspace with perfect precision. "Admiral, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, Earth's most powerful battleship. Around him, the Second Fleet took formation, 50 ships that represented humanity's finest military technology. They were outnumbered 4-1, but Jake had not come here to fight fair. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison," he broadcast, on an open channel. "Today, we make our first statement to the galaxy. No empire, no matter how powerful, will be allowed to enslave innocent people. Humanity stands as the protector of all who cannot protect themselves." On the surface of the Zephyrian homeworld, Colonel Matt Stone gathered his expanded force in the crystal caverns beneath the capital city. What had started as a small strike team was now an army. 50,000 Zephyrians had joined the resistance, armed with human weapons and trained in human tactics. "The real battle starts now," Matt told his commanders. "The Kreks are going to try to break us with orbital bombardment, but we've spent months preparing for this moment." Victor, now wearing the uniform of a Zephyrian general, studied the defensive positions on his tactical display. The humans had taught his people to dig tunnels that connected every major city. They had built underground factories that could produce weapons and ammunition. Most importantly, they had shown the Zephyrians how to be soldiers. "Our people are ready," Victor said. "We will not run or hide anymore. Today, we take our world back." The space battle began when Admiral Morrison gave the order to attack. The human fleet split into 3 groups, using hit-and-run tactics that the Kreks had never faced before. Instead of meeting the Death Fleet head-on, they struck at the edges, destroying support ships and cutting supply lines. Captain Tony Mitchell led his squadron of fast attack ships in a raid on the Kreks bombardment platforms. The USS Vengeance had been joined by 5 sister ships, all equipped with the experimental plasma weapons that Karen Brown had perfected. "Target the power cores," Tony ordered as his ships dove toward the massive platforms. "We need to stop them before they can. Fire on the planet." The Vengeance's guns spoke with deadly precision, each shot finding weak points in Krek's armor. Behind them, the other human ships followed their lead, turning the bombardment platforms into clouds of burning debris. But the Kreks were not defenseless. Their warships returned fire with weapons that could melt asteroids. Several human ships took critical damage, their crews fighting to keep engines and weapons online. Captain Lisa Gray's destroyer took a direct hit from a Krek's battle cruiser. Half her crew was dead. Her ship was venting atmosphere, but she refused to retreat. "All remaining power to weapons," she ordered. "We're going to take that bastard with us." Her ship rammed the Krek's cruiser at full speed, both vessels disappearing in a fireball that lit up the night sky. Lisa and her crew died as heroes, but their sacrifice allowed the rest of the squadron to escape. On the planet's surface, Krek's drop pods began falling like deadly rain. Each pod carried 20 elite warriors in powered armor, armed with weapons designed to kill anything that moved. They expected to face frightened civilians and a few scattered rebels. Instead, they found hell. Amanda Cross had positioned sniper teams on every rooftop and tower in the capital city. As the pods landed, her marksmen opened fire with armor-piercing rounds that could punch through Krek's battlesuits. The invaders died before they could clear their landing zones. Steve Parker had turned the city into one giant booby trap. Every building held hidden explosives. Every street corner concealed a remote-controlled bomb. The Kreks found themselves walking through a maze of death, never knowing when the next step would be their last. Danny Clark led his guerrilla teams in a running battle through the crystal spires of Zephyros. The aliens were learning to use their city's unique architecture against the invaders, appearing from hidden passages to strike, and then vanishing into the tunnels. Nia Walsh coordinated the defense from her command bunker deep underground. She could see the entire battlefield through cameras and sensors that the humans had installed throughout the city. When Krek's forces concentrated for an attack, she directed artillery fire that shattered their formations. But the Kreks kept coming. For every warrior that fell, 2 more took his place. They had numbers and heavy weapons on their side. Slowly, inevitably, they began to push the defenders back. In space, the battle was going no better for humanity. The Second Fleet had destroyed a third of the Krek ships, but they were taking heavy losses in return. Admiral Morrison watched his tactical display as another human cruiser exploded under concentrated fire. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the Krek's flagship." Warlord Thakmer's image appeared on the main screen. The alien warlord's armor was scorched from battle, but his eyes burned with fury. "Human Admiral," Thakmer snarled, "you fight well for primitives, but you cannot win. Surrender now, and I will grant your warriors a quick death." Morrison smiled coldly. "Warlord, you misunderstand the situation. We're not here to win. We're here to send a message." "What message?" Thakmer demanded. "That bullies can be stopped. That tyrants can be beaten. That somewhere in this galaxy there are people willing to fight for what's right, no matter what the cost." Morrison cut the transmission and opened a channel to all human ships. "All vessels, prepare for Directive 7. Directive 7 was humanity's final contingency plan. If they could not save the Zephyrians through conventional means, they would ensure that the Kreks paid such a terrible price that other species would remember it forever. Every human ship in the fleet turned toward the Krek's dreadnought Worldbreaker. They came not to fight, but to die in a way that would shatter their enemies' morale forever. But as the human ships began their final charge, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace throughout the system, not human ships, but vessels from a dozen different species. The Altarian Republic had sent a battle group. The Centauri Federation deployed 3 carrier groups. Even the normally peaceful vegan collective had dispatched their defensive fleet. Word of humanity's stand had spread across the galaxy, inspiring other species to join the fight. "This is Admiral Zektar of the Altarian Fleet," came a transmission. "We stand with humanity against tyranny. Centauri forces ready to engage." Another voice added, "For freedom and justice." Warlord Thakmer watched in disbelief as his numerical advantage disappeared. The Death Fleet suddenly faced not 50 human ships, but 300 vessels from across the galaxy. The humans had done something the Kreks never expected. They had inspired others to fight. The tide of battle turned in minutes. The combined alien fleet struck the Kreks with coordinated precision, using tactics that humanity had shared freely with anyone willing to listen. The Death Fleet, designed to crush rebellion through overwhelming force, found itself outmaneuvered and outgunned. On the planet's surface, Krek's ground forces began receiving retreat orders as their orbital support disappeared. But the Zephyrians were not willing to let their oppressors escape so easily. Vector led the final assault on the Krek's command center, carrying the combat knife that Danny Clark had given him. His skin blazed with patterns of victory as he fought alongside humans and his own people, driving the invaders from their world forever. The battle ended when Warlord Thakmer's dreadnought exploded under concentrated fire from the Allied fleet. With their leader dead and their forces shattered, the surviving Krek ships fled into hyperspace. In the aftermath, representatives from dozens of species gathered on the Zephyrian homeworld. They had come to thank humanity for showing them that the Kreks could be defeated. But they found something unexpected. Elder Lyrana stood before the assembled delegates, her ancient eyes reflecting wisdom earned through suffering. "You saved us," she said to Admiral Morrison. "But I must ask, what have we unleashed upon the galaxy?" Morrison understood her concern. The galaxy had seen what humans were capable of when they fought without restraint. Some species would fear them as much as they had feared the Kreks. "We're Not conquerors, Morrison replied. We're protectors. Earth has no interest in building an empire, but we will stand guard against those who prey on the innocent. The Galactic Council, which had ignored the Zephyrian crisis for months, suddenly found themselves irrelevant. A new order was taking shape, one where might served right instead of the other way around. Species that had suffered under Krek's rule began reaching out to Earth. They wanted to learn who.